have a discussion on the issue. So, would you like to start,
please?
Dawood, please.
Very happy to start. Assalamu Alikum, everyone. I came into this industry 20 years ago, and for the first 5 years I struggled trying to explain it on the basis of riba or lack of riba, and found that I always used to get my words mixed up and my tongue tied. So I usually introduce Islamic finance as something which is to do with the effective mobilization of capital for the benefit of the real economy. And it's on that note that I want to start at a fairly high level so that the other participants can perhaps get into a bit more detail in their introductions. For me, there is a huge opportunity now for Islamic finance to be used as a tool for economic reforms, but we actually have to do it on the basis of improving the level of education and understanding in Islamic finance. And only through that improvement will we be able to change perceptions. As many of you have heard during the debates and discussions over the last couple of days, there are healthy differences of opinion on various aspects within our own industry. But there is also the case that the majority of the world doesn't understand Islam or Islamic finance, so there is an opportunity for us not only educate there, but to change perceptions. And I think the timing is excellent. For the last 2, 3, 4 years, 4 years now, nearly 4 years, we've been under the cloud of a global financial crisis. And in terms of opportunity for economic reforms, a lot of the work that I was doing in my previous job when I was heading up a consultancy firm before coming into INSIF was revolving in the Western world around helping them understand what the business opportunities might be in Islamic finance. And the reason why they were looking at Islamic finance was primarily because they were seeking liquidity and they were seeking alternative forms of investment, and they were also seeking some level of stability in terms of the returns that they would be getting from assets that they invested in. So it's seen as a viable alternative, but we have to make sure that we speak to the listening of that audience. And that audience won't be able to receive the messages unless we educate them, unless we start changing the perceptions. And I'll rest it there and let others continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawood.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, our topic is basically looking at economic reform in relation to Islamic finance and the role that Islamic finance can play in economic reform. Of course, if we look at this region, Middle East, North Africa region, we've seen a lot of economic reforms going back a couple of decades or so. And in some countries have worked to some extent, but clearly, overall, the results have been pretty disappointing. The mere fact that we've had all the unrest in North Africa and so on indicates basically a failure of economic reforms in countries like Egypt, Tunisia, right across North Africa. As far as Islamic finance is concerned, one feature of economic reforms is basically quite often slimming down the public sector, expanding the private sector. And Islamic finance can contribute to that, maybe making the economic reforms more successful by having a more successful private sector. The reality is that in much of the region we've got problems with employment, particularly generating employment for young people. Obviously, governments have done what they can, but their resources are limited. So it's the private sector that has to generate the employment. So essentially, Islamic finance can provide, of course, finance for the private sector. And a vibrant private sector is clearly going to be helpful for future prosperity. In fact, it's essential for future prosperity. That financing can come in all the kind of ways that we've talked about, Murabaha, Mudaraba, Musharaka, Ijara, all the things we've talked about. It can also come through corporate sukuk issuance, because clearly the private sector needs to raise, particularly large companies in the private sector, need to raise substantial funds. So I think Islamic finance can play a role in all of that, but one has to recognize that Islamic finance, Islamic banks, Islamic financial institutions, they can't do the reforms. All they can do is they can contribute to basically the success of reform policies. My message would be they haven't been terribly successful, these reform policies in this region over the last 20 years or more, but nevertheless, reform will continue. Of course, we see new governments arising. I've just come from Tunisia to here. We see new governments arising in North Africa, changes in Egypt and so on. Clearly, reform is on the, new types of reform are on the way, and also, I think, a greater interest in how Islamic finance can play a role in these economies, because, of course, its role in the past has been rather limited. But hopefully, with the new political parties that have been elected in Tunisia and Egypt, we will actually see a growth of Islamic finance, which has lagged way behind what's happened in the GCC. GCC economies have been successfully restructured in many respects. I won't go on too long, but if we look at the Saudi experience, for example, it's been much more successful than the experience of North African countries. Saudi Arabia has managed to diversify. They have managed to create quite a lot of private sector jobs for Saudis, and that's encouraging. But it's an ongoing, process basically. But Islamic finance has played a role for that in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, certainly. And hopefully well in Oman as well.
Thank you. Assalamu Alikum. I'm James Fierro. I am from Vancouver, Canada. And I must say, it's my first visit to Oman, and it is just such an incredibly beautiful country, at least a little bit of it that I've seen. In Vancouver, we have a situation where the Rocky Mountains meet the ocean, and it's a really majestic view. And I see you have a similar beauty here, thanks to the Almighty God. I must say I'm even more impressed by the people I've met here. I found this to be really just a wonderful experience, very kind and generous people. And I'll just give you one little illustration that last night we were at dinner together, and I was admiring this cane that this stick that this gentleman had across the table from me. Fahad, is he here? Oh yeah, he's way up in the back. I'm not surprised. He's a very humble individual. But when I was admiring his cane, he handed it to me and said, "It's yours." And it was just, to me, it made a huge impression. So, a wonderful group of people you have. I've also enjoyed the healthy debate around this topic of Islamic finance, Islamic banking versus traditional banking, Sharia-based versus Sharia-compliant, and innovation versus fundamentals. I'm actually going to come at this from quite a different viewpoint. I'm an outsider to Islamic finance, other than I've been trying to learn about it the last year and a half or so. So I would ask you to kind of forgive me in advance for any comments I make that are incorrect. But I do have some views about what the opportunities going forward might be. And I think Oman is in a particularly unique position because it is newcomer to this activity of Islamic finance. And as a result, it has this wonderful benefit of being able to leapfrog all the others. Not unlike what happened in China. They were so late coming into the telecom world, and then suddenly they had the best telecom in the world. And I think Oman is in that situation to benefit from the 40 years of development that have gone before them. However, the bad news, and I do think there's some good news, but there's some bad news, is that it's not about banking. And it's not really about making Sharia compliant banking. Let's face it, in the discussions the last couple days, we've seen all of the struggle associated with trying to fit the square peg of Islamic banking into the round hole of traditional banking. And I would even go further to say that I'm not sure you want to do that, because there was a recent transaction where Richard Branson acquired a bank in the UK, and there was a front page of one of the local papers with a picture of him and a bunch of cheerleading girls, and they were all standing there, and each of them was going, "Give me a B, and give me an A, and give me an N, and give me a K," and then there was Branson saying, "What's that spell?" Disaster. And I hate to say it, but I think the disaster goes beyond banking. And I think what we're really talking about here is a much bigger opportunity than Islamic finance, than Islamic banking. It's actually way beyond that. And this disaster goes way beyond that. It's a global economic system that's failing. That's what needs addressing, not the banking. The banking is just really kind of a symptom of years of failing economy. That if you kind of go back and say, well, where did this problem begin? And you start to look at the origination of money. I mean, if you go back to years and years ago, before money, we just traded. And it was very efficient. And there was no speculation, there was no interest. It was a very efficient mechanism for trade. However, it became problematic to meet the double coincidence of wants, that you have what I want and I have what you want at the same time, so we can do a trade. Now, of course, the first solution was to go and create bazaars, and people would do multi-party trades, and they would sort out things. And then the evolution of money, and then people started to realize that they could make money off of money, the goldsmiths in particular, driving a whole set of innovation around, hey, we can make interest, we can make money, became sovereign. Sovereign nations realized they could make money off money, and we ended up with speculation, foreign exchange. We're in a world today with 178 currencies. That is absolutely ridiculous. We're talking about globalization, WTO, but we have 178 currencies? That is fundamentally flawed. And so there's foreign exchange in any country that wants to do business with another country, and that just stimulates speculation, and the bankers figured out they can make money off that, and anyhow, you know the problems. So the world is now starting to face up to this problem. And it's not been a new problem, but it's hit in a fairly material way in 2008 with the crisis, where demand went like this. It went off a waterfall. But the interesting thing is the world was still building ahead of demand. So everyone's saying, oh, we're going to build, China's building. You have to build first, and then you fill. So you build a hotel, it's empty, you fill it. Everybody that's building ahead of demand has unused capacity. Today, the world is abundant in capacity in unprecedented levels. Never before seen the level of unused capacity that exists in the world. Now, here's the other bizarre thing. It's also abundant in demand. There's an immense amount of demand out there. Africa has immense demand. Guess what they don't have? Money. So there's demand and capacity, but they can't come together because the global monetary system is not providing the bridge. It's failing. So, everyone is crying out for a solution, and there isn't one that is apparent. Islamic financing is gaining traction because people are thinking, well, maybe there's something there. But again, I think Oman is in a particularly interesting position. And the woman earlier who made the comment that there needs to be an alternative way, and some of the earlier comments that we need to address the fundamental of economics first. Dr. Mohammed Omar Farouk, I think, said it perfectly, that we need a full economic system solution, not just to look at banking. We need to find mechanisms to resource mobilization. And these are the underlying issues. I don't want to take too much more time, but look, we live in a world that's abundant in capacity. There is a solution to this, and it's about backing up and creating a new economic architecture. That is what we've been doing for 10 years. We've had a mission of trying to rethink the architecture, and we don't really have the time to tell you all the detail of that, but I can tell you we've involved think tanks, leading monetary economists, leading supply-demand economists. I'll give you 2 quotes. One was from Paul Volcker, the past chairman of the Fed, who said that if you're successful doing what you guys are setting out to accomplish as a mission, you'll create a unit of account more meaningful than the US dollar as a means of trade. And the other one that was quite interesting was from the IMF. And this was after the crash of 2008. We were invited to present a white paper, and the number 2 person at IMF said to me that, this may be the most practical and sensible solution that we've seen. It's a private sector initiative. It's not government. You can't get 178 governments to agree on a new global monetary policy that is really what the world needs. The world needs a global common unit of tender, but try and get a handful of the strongest countries in the world to do that. Good luck. So look, I won't take any more time. I've probably gone on way beyond what I should have, but I can tell you this. I am personally committed to this agenda. I see many intersection points with the Islamic world and the basic fundamental principles of fairness, of moral ethics, of inclusion, and of justice in economics. And it's not only the Islamic community. I mean, look, this Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, it's the same principles. If you go read the banners, it's economic justice, it's unfairness. That's what the world needs to address. So thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity.
So, Siddhar, you have been asking questions for the whole 2 days. Now, let us now return the question to you, please.
Thank you. You didn't ask me question. Okay, so
I mean, the question is,
yeah, that's right.
How do you think that
actually I'm going to come up with this
reform?
Yeah. I'm going to come up with a statement which is very easy. Hence, I will be getting questions which will be very easy as well. Actually, I would be looking into the possible role of Islamic banking in bringing social reforms. So I will be looking into the possible role of Islamic banking to bring social reforms in Islamic economies. It's a very simple proposition. It's based on my observation. When I look at the users of Islamic financial services, I find this profile. It's a young person in their mid-20s, probably between the age of 25 and 30. And this person is educated, probably with some kind of foreign qualification. The person is exposed to multicultural society, has some pluralist view on the society he or she lives in. And this person is very modern in their approach. And that person happens to be a user of Islamic financial services. To me, this identity is very, very important. This is an identity which is emerging in the societies where Islamic banking and finance is a significant activity. Whether this country is a Muslim country or this is a non-Muslim country like UK. Sometimes I sit next to someone in the London Underground. This girl, she is going to her office, and from her appearance, I would not even guess that she is Muslim. We start talking about, where are you going? Oh, I work for Clifford Chance, for example. What do you do? Now, I am actually in their Islamic finance department. Oh, Islamic finance department? I would not have guessed from her appearance that actually she knows anything about Islam. And when we start talking about the things, she knows a lot about mudaraba, musharaka, ijara, murabaha. So this new kind of identity which is emerging in the countries where Islamic banking is in existence, this is very, very interesting. Or generation of my parents, the Islamic identity was very, very different. This new identity is actually part of a new Islamic financial lifestyle. It's not just about praying, fasting, and other rituals. These things are very, very important, but this is actually something in addition to the ibadat. The new generation which is getting interested in Islamic banking and finance is actually bringing Islamic relevance to muamalat. And what I say that Islamic banking and finance is playing a very significant role in bringing Muslims out of mosques into the market. So those Muslims who are coming out of the mosques into the markets, they are bringing, the spirit and barakah of mosques into the market. This is a very, very interesting phenomenon. Of course, it has relevance for social reforms, but definitely, in a long-term context, this change in society has implications for economic reforms as well. And I, as an advocate of Islamic banking and finance, am very hopeful that this role which Islamic banking and finance is playing in bringing a change in Muslim societies, this is going to be very, very effective in determining Islamic economic behavior in the generations to come, which would be subscribing to the principles of Islamic banking and finance.
Thank you, Professor. Oliver, please.
Thank you. My answer is going to expound a little bit on what Humayun said, but I'd like to begin my answer with a short story, which I think will explain where I'm going. This is a story that some of you may recognize. It comes out of scripture, not the Islamic scripture, though. There are three boys, three men, and they have this very wise father. So the father says to the men, he says, look, I'm going away for 3 months. Here's a sack of gold each. Do with it what you will. I'll come back and I'll see what you did. Comes back after about 3 months. The eldest son has invested the money into this business and has doubled it. So the father says, well done, son. Here's another sack of gold. You really succeeded me in every respect. So he's very happy. Son number 2 comes to him with tears in his eyes, saying, Father, I failed you. You know, I invested into a business and I lost it all. So he says, son, don't worry. Here's another sack of gold for your efforts. Son number 3 comes to him and says, Father, you're going to be the happiest with me because I safeguarded what you had given me. I buried it under the sand. And he slaps him and he takes the sack of gold back and says, you failed me worst of all. And the notion behind the story is a deep spiritual principle that God gives us certain gifts. There are references in the Quran, repeated references that says God favors those who strive more than those that are sedentary. We're supposed to really strive with everything we have in our lives. To put money in the bank is worse than burying it in the sand. We have to engage with it. And I think this is probably what Humayun was alluding to, that, you know, if you really look at what this conference and Islamic finance is all about, it is about a fundamental change. It's about recognizing that receiving interest, and we all know Surah Baqarah, and the very serious words used in the Quran to describe the offense. And I'll just repeat it. It says, those who eat riba shall be deranged as if touched by the hand of the devil. Those who stop taking usury shall have their lives and their incomes preserved. Those that do not shall be condemned to hellfire and shall be at war with the Prophet ﷺ and the Messenger. God and his Prophet. I mean, these words in the Quran are not used in many other circumstances. The short point that I'm trying to make through all of this is that the reason why riba and interest is so serious is because in some philosophers' opinion, the notion of putting money in a bank and receiving money out of money is an act that is relegated to the divine domain. It is an act of, as some scholars have described, ex nihilo creation, or the creation of life, and is the ultimate form of idol worship by having money in a bank. So, you know, and there's an interesting article I've done on our website that talks about this. So what all of this means is that if we as Muslims really endeavor in our own ways to get away from non-Islamic investments and insist on doing things in an Islamic way, we will naturally result in our communities and our countries in the sort of economic reform that will have a domino effect. And this is what I think Humayun was referring to, and you'll probably add in bits later, or correct me if it's not. But this is my view. My view is it starts on an individual level, and then it spreads from there. But I think each person can really feel empowered because we can insist on not putting our money into a bank, even if it means losing money. I was once at a Your Money conference, and I asked the audience, how many people in the audience would invest in a Sharia-compliant product, even if it meant they would lose some money? And a lot of people put their hands up, you know. And I think that's the essence. We do this not for material gain on this world, but for eventual spiritual points.
Thank you very much. Now, before giving the opportunity to the floor to ask some questions, I would like to ask Professor Wilson first, and then maybe another question to